Welcome to Beekeeping Today podcast presented by Bee Culture. Beekeeping Today podcast is your source for beekeeping news, information, and entertainment. I'm Jeff Ott.
And I'm Kim Flatham.
Hey, Jeff and Kim. Today's sponsor is Global Patties. They're a family-operated business that manufactures protein supplement patties for honeybees. It's a good time to think about honeybee nutrition. Feeding your hive's protein supplement patties will ensure that they produce strong and healthy colonies by increasing brood production and overall honey flow. Now is a great time to consider what type of patty is right for your area and your honeybees. Global offers a variety of standard patties as well as custom patties to meet your needs. No matter where you are, Global is ready to serve you out of their manufacturing plants in Airdrie, Alberta, and in Butte, Montana, or from distribution depots across the continent. Visit them today at www.globalpatties.com.
Thanks, Sherry, and thank you, Global Patties. You know, each week we get to talk about how much we appreciate our sponsor support, and we know you'd rather we get right to talking about beekeeping. However, our great sponsors are critical to help making all of this happen. From the transcripts, the hosting fees, the software, the hardware, the microphones, the subscriptions, the recorders, they enable each episode. So with that, thanks to Bee Culture Magazine for continuing their presenting sponsorship of this podcast. Bee Culture has been the magazine for American beekeeping since 1873. Subscribe to Bee Culture today. Hey everybody, thanks for joining us. We're really happy you're here. Before we get started, just a quick reminder to subscribe or follow Beekeeping Today podcast and give us a 5-star rating. It really does help. Also, we are now adding complete transcripts of each episode on the website after the show notes. Check them out. You can also leave questions and comments online under each show. You can leave a comment, ask a question, reply to a question, ours or listeners. Click on Leave a Comment at the top of the episode's show notes to join the discussion. Have you listened to an episode and thought, that person sounds really interesting, and I'd like to know more about them? Well, now you can. Each episode links to a guest profile. Each profile has a guest photo, bio, contact information, including Instagram and Twitter details if they have them. Check it out. And finally, share the podcast with your beekeeping friends, email them links, or mention it at your next beekeeper meeting. Hey everybody, thanks again for joining us today. We have a good show all set with pro cyclist and beekeeper Maghalie Rochette, but more on that in just a few. I hope your summer's starting out well. It's definitely been rainy and cool in the Pacific Northwest, but the bees are making it out of their hives, some foraging and unfortunately some en masse as part of a swarm. I caught one of them. The other is interesting, and it just happened a week ago or so, and I didn't even know it happened until about 5 days had passed. The other day I was out in the bee yard watching the comings and goings of the hive entrances. You can tell a lot just by observing. One colony did not show as much activity as the others. Something obviously unusual was going on. They had been like the others, but I didn't have time to open it up at that time, but later in the day I did look at the hive's temperature history online. I have those sensors in all of my colonies. Looking at the past 7 days, the colony was effectively maintaining brood temps at nearly 94 degrees. That's about 34 degrees Celsius in the lower hive body. Then between 1:30 and 2 o'clock p.m., there was a definite spike increase of about 4 degrees, then a drop in brood box temperature. After that, the lower box temperature fluctuated on a daily cycle from a low of 84 degrees at night to 94s during the day. They had definitely swarmed on Memorial Day. I'll put a link to my online view of my colonies in the show notes so you can also see that sudden spike in temperature variation after the swarm. Well, I missed that swarm. I have no idea where they went, and honestly is just as good because I don't have any empty equipment at this time anyways. I guess I may have been able to put something together for a short bit, but it just wasn't meant to be. And good luck to them. I will chalk it up to yet another colony that started with a nuke that probably had last year's queen and was all set to prime to swarm this spring. I don't think I'll get nukes next time I need to buy bees in the spring. I had to think about how I missed that swarm. Memorial Day was relatively nice, which does explain the swarm on that day. After all, 2 days of rain followed by a nice day is the standing definition of a weekend here. As I think about it, I was out on my bicycle, putting in some miles. If I'm not behind a computer working on something like I am at this moment, and I have free time, I'm either in the bee yard or out on the bike. Why, you may be asking yourself, is this guy carrying on all about bikes? This is a beekeeping podcast, for crying out loud. Well, it is. It really is. But there are beekeepers with all types of backgrounds, histories, and careers. And that, my friends, brings us to this week's guest, Maghalie Rochette. Maghalie is a professional bike racer. She gets paid to train and race her bike. She has sponsors who pay her to wear their clothing, to ride their brand of bike, to use their wheels or their tires, to use their brand of gear, no matter what it is, even to sunglasses. And she's a beekeeper. Your mental picture of who is a beekeeper probably does not include someone who wears lycra shorts and a jersey to work. We know, and I'm using the term we as in we beekeepers, know that we are a bit strange. The general population typically classifies individuals who love insects and are willing to stick their hands into a box of 40 to 60,000 stinging insects as being maybe a half bubble off plum. But that is something we also wear as a badge of distinction, of individuality, and that's okay. Kim and I are spinning this around on its ear and looking at it from the other direction. Who are the beekeepers we wouldn't typically think are beekeepers? Last week, we had a New York City police officer who was not only a beekeeper, but the official beekeeper at the NYPD. This week, we're talking to a professional bike racer. And we're looking for others. Do you know anyone who fits this description and would be a good guest? Let us know in the comments of this episode or send us an email, preferably with contact information. Now, this is important. Before you fill the inbox with names like Beyonce, Morgan Freeman, Flea, or Leonardo DiCaprio, don't send us those folks as suggestions unless you know them. You know people who know people. Or, well, you happen to be Beyonce, Morgan, Flea, or Leo and want to join us as an episode. Well, really, seriously, if you are listening to the show and you're one of those folks or others, let us know. Watch this space for future episodes of beekeepers who you wouldn't think are beekeepers. Subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss even one show, like I missed that swarm this week. Okay, let's get on with this week's guest, Maghalie Rochette. But first, a quick word from our friends at Strong Microbials, who've just released a new probiotic that can be fed in syrup, in a patty, or even dry, Super DFM Extend. You can find more information on their website.
Hey, beekeepers! Many times during the year, honeybees encounter scarcity of floral sources. As good beekeepers, we feed our bees artificial diets of protein and carbohydrates to keep them going during those stressful times. What is missing, though, are key components. The good microbes necessary for a bee to digest the food and convert it into metabolic energy. Only Super DFM Honeybee by Strong Microbials can provide the necessary microbes to optimally convert the artificial diet into energy necessary for improving longevity, reproduction, immunity, and much more. Super DFM Honeybee is an all-natural probiotic supplement for your honeybees. Find it at strongmicrobials.com or at fine bee supply stores everywhere.
Hey, thanks a lot, Strong Microbial. And while you're at the Strong Microbial site, make sure you click on and subscribe to The Hive, the regular newsletter full of interesting beekeeping facts and information. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the show. Sitting across the virtual Beekeeping Today podcast table is pro cyclist Maghalie Rochette. Sorry, I always mess up the names, Maghalie. It's just become a thing. I apologize. Maghalie is joining us to. We're just talking to people you wouldn't expect to be beekeepers. Anyone can be a beekeeper, and Maghalie is another person who proves that. So, Maghalie, welcome to Beekeeping Today podcast.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. It's I'm a big fan of beekeepers, and so being a very amateur beekeeper myself, it's very cool to be on the show. So, thank you for inviting me.
Well, Maghalie, I have to admit, I have never met a professional bicycle racer. So you are the first in my experience. I could have 100 questions about that, but that isn't what we're talking about today. But it's very interesting, and you're the first.
Well, we can branch into professional cycling and cycling in general, just to give our listeners who may be like you, Kim, who really don't understand what pro cycling is about, and just maybe a high level 10,000 foot level view of what do you do on a day-to-day basis, Maghalie? I think that would be interesting.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, though, first of all, to go back to what Kim was saying, I think, yeah, in a way, it can sound very different from being a professional beekeeper, but I think it's actually very similar in a sense that it's a passion job, like you do that because for me, I've always loved cycling. It's the thing I love the most, and now I get to do it as a job. So what was once a hobby is now a job. So it's very much rooted in passion, which I believe it's probably the same thing as for you as a beekeeper, professional beekeeper. Now, what I do on a day-to-day basis, I ride my bike and I train. So really what a week looks like is basically my body is my tool to perform. So I have to be fit and strong, and I spend all my time trying to become fit and strong. So I train many hours on the bicycle, usually around 20 to 25 hours of pedaling and training every week. But then you don't get paid for just riding and training. Being a professional means that you're earning a salary doing this. And to do that, you have to compete at the highest level. So I travel around the world to compete in bike races. So whether it's World Cups or World Championships, I go where the highest level of racing is and race there, follow circuits that way. And then, yeah, you can just... It's fun. I mean, my goal is to see how good I can be amongst the best in the world and how far I can go that way. And yeah, it's pretty fun. And then another side job, I guess, is we represent cycling. So we try to make cycling, we try to, in an authentic way, or just sharing the positivity of riding bicycle, basically. So, by meeting people in the community or sometimes organizing ride, just connecting with the fans of cycling to just spread the love of cycling. And we work with companies that help us do that as well. So it's pretty fun. It's based on trying to perform, but also sharing the love of cycling.
Jeff, I have to tell you, I have not been on a bicycle in 33 years.
Kim, you're missing it. You're missing it.
And everybody says that it's like riding a bicycle. Once you learn, you never forget. I would be, I think, a little hesitant to try. I think it'd probably be painful.
Yeah, well, that's the thing about cycling. I think getting back into running can be painful because it's a weight-bearing exercise. But cycling, there are two things I'll say about that, I guess. Cycling, you can go as easy or as slow as you want and just move the pedals slowly. And if you're enjoying it, then slowly increase the speed. But it's not as hard to get back into than running, for example. And the other thing is, nowadays with technologies, there are a lot of electric bikes, so e-bikes they're called, and those are actually awesome. I have one for commuting at home to go to the market and stuff. Even if my job is to pedal a real bike, I'm fit enough to pedal a real bike, but the e-bikes are really fun and they're very accessible and they allow you to, just get back into cycling and maybe more accessible way, really. So maybe that's an option if that's interesting to you.
Well, I'll certainly put it under consideration.
Ask Santa Claus for this coming year. Maghalie, I wanted to ask you, there's different types of bike racing. What kind of racing do you do?
Yeah. So the racing that I do is two things. Mostly the main discipline that I do is called cyclocross. And many people won't know what that is, but it's very popular in Europe. And an easy way to describe it would be that it's something between mountain biking and road biking. So the bike looks like a road bike, but it has knobby tires on it. And the courses that we race on, it's kind of like an obstacle race on a bike. So we ride in parks, and then sometimes there can be mud or sand, and we can even encounter some stairs that you have to jump off the bike and run with the bike and get back on. So that's one type of racing that I do. And the other one is mountain biking. So cross-country mountain biking. I don't know if you're more familiar with that, but this is like more in trails, and you go up and down mountains. So that's mainly what I do. And of course I train on the road as well, but those are the two disciplines that I prefer.
I think most people think of bicycle racing as the traditional road racing, but it does, and track racing, of course, but the cyclocross is lesser known, and mountain biking is popular because you see the bikes everywhere.
Exactly.
But yeah, so that's very cool. Thanks so much. That sounds like a very stressful job at times, and not only the travel, because I travel for work at times, and travels, as much as people like to think it's fun, it's, as a job, it's stressful. So that kind of brings me back around to thinking about the bees, and so let's talk about how the bees help you in your job, and if they do, and then let's start at the very beginning and how you got started in bees.
Yeah, so how I got started is actually one of my teammates on my previous cycling team. She invited me to her house, and I knew she had bees, but I wasn't very familiar at all with it. And when I visited her at her house, she had a manipulation to do on the bees, and she said, do you want to come and check it out and see what it looks like? And so I put on a suit, and I was really curious to see what it was like. And for me, like when she opened the hive and I got to see all the bees inside, and I just think it's so beautiful what it looks like, and seeing them works and getting to see just the inside of the hive. And then, I mean, maybe you're not supposed to do that, but she gave me a little piece of the honeycomb to see what it looked like. And I bit in it. I was blown away. I thought this was the coolest thing ever. And then on top of that, she was explaining to me the maneuver that she was doing and why. And I got to understand just how smart the bees are and just how organized the colony is. And I thought this was fascinating. And so that year, my husband and I decided to have our own bees and start to learn about it. So that's how I got into it. So thank you to that teammate.
Yeah.
And yes, as you said, it is, I mean, I don't want to say my job is stressful, because we're not saving lives or anything. You know, this is like a very personal pursuit. But the one thing about being a professional cycling is that absolutely everything that you do in life, since your body is your tool for work, every single thing that you do has an impact on how you will perform. And so it's constantly on your mind, whether like what you're eating, what you're like, all the activities that you're doing can affect your performance. So you always think about it. And in that way, it can be a little bit stressful. And yes, like absolutely, beekeeping is relaxing to me, because it's a moment when I'm just home and I don't really need to think about cycling, and I can just dive into this and get interested in what someone else is doing and not what I'm doing, you know, and I can like pay attention and learn from the bees. And yes, for me, like that's absolutely relaxing, and just, I just love it. Yeah, it's so fun.
That's very good. So we've introduced you. You're a cyclist. You got into bees. We neglected to ask, where are you located?
Yeah, so I live in Canada, in the French-speaking part of Canada, so the province of Quebec. Mm-hmm. And if anyone is familiar with the city of Montreal, I'm about 45 minutes north of Montreal. So
it's still, you get pretty good winters there.
Yes, we get huge winters.
Definitely 4 seasons of beekeeping.
Better Bee knows that varroa mites are public enemy number 1 for our honeybees. If you are not treatment-free, your varroa mite management plan should include a variety of medications to prevent resistance to treatment. Head over to betterbee.com/varroa to get your sugar roll and alcohol wash monitoring kits, as well as your Formic Pro, oxalic acid, Apivar, and other mite management medications. Let Better Bee help you protect your bees from varroa.
Get ahead of your varroa problem today at betterbee.com.
Well, we heard this year there's been a lot of information coming from your part of the world about your last winter being so hard on the bees. What have you heard, and do they have any thoughts on what was going on? Why this happened this year?
Yeah, I mean, so let's start by saying how I love the bees and I love beekeeping, but I'm not a professional. So I'm 100% amateur. So don't take anything that I'm saying for granted. But yes, it has been a really difficult winter. We've had hives. We've had 3 hives for the last 4 years. And in all those years, we had lost 1 hive once. And now this year, we've actually lost the 3 of them. And so clearly something happened. From what I'm hearing around with people that I'm talking to, I think what happened is that this year, and it's probably due to climate change, but this year, at some point in February, there were 2 days that were much warmer than normal, that went above 0 and like really warm. And I think maybe the bees saw it as spring that was arriving, but then instantly the next day it got like below 20 or something. And I think that caught some bees off guard that maybe like went out of the hives and weren't able to come back because it got too cold, and then the colony inside got too small, wasn't able to keep the heat, and then just died. So that's what I've heard. As I said, I'm not a professional, I'm not a scientific, so I don't know if that is the only thing. It might be multiple factors that just together ended up being a bad year. But yeah, it's super sad. What have you guys heard? What do you think it could be? And how was it in Ohio? Was it a similar kind of situation?
Well, Ohio winter was, I'm going to say, was fairly typical this year. Not terrible and not easy, just sort of an regular Ohio winter. And Ohio winters aren't the nicest there is. So there's been some problems. I've had some problems with bees. I've lost some this year. And I'm not going to say I've never lost bees because I've been doing this way too long to know, and you'd know better. But and you wouldn't believe me anyway if I said I've never lost bees. Anyway,
yeah, I'd call you on that one.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you would. So our winter here this year was, I'm going to say, average. You know, if I said we probably lost somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 to 40% of the bees in this part of Ohio this last winter. And for the last several years, that's about average, which is terrible. But that's been about average. And it's primarily due to stresses from mites and viruses. Is why we see it. We don't get treatments on in time, or we don't get them on at all. Mm-hmm. And as a result, when bees go into that broodless period in the fall, then the mites just kind of take over. So anyway, like I said, that's what we've been hearing from pretty much all over Canada this year, that you had a winter that you wish you could have avoided. Mm-hmm. Let me branch off for a second here. Where you live in Canada, you are primarily suburban, rural, urban. What's your apiary like?
It's mostly rural. We have a ski hill we live on the side of a ski hill, which in the summer is nothing. It's just wildflowers that grow on it. And then there's a forest around us as well. So pretty rural, I would say. So
it sounds like you're fairly isolated from other beekeepers.
Yes. I mean, to be honest, I don't even know if there are, I'm sure there are, but just small like we are, I think around the village probably. But I'm not even familiar if there are many others around here.
Being next to commercial or large hobby operations can be an issue if their treatment schedule is different than yours, and so that was one of the things I was wondering. But
interesting.
Yes, I got to ask. You know, there's a lot of professional athletes. I don't know a lot of professional athletes, but I've heard of this, that a big bite of honey right before the game helps energy and all of those things. And now you've got honey, your own honey to use. Do you take a big helping of honey before you take off on one of your races?
I mean, it's You're right. Like the honey would be great before training or even during training, because you want like those fast sugars that will make you fast and give you quick energy. So I wouldn't say that I carry a jar of honey with me when I'm riding. However, I do eat it almost every morning before I go for training. So yes, like this is something that I use, and it's really cool knowing where it comes from, knowing that it's just natural and there's no fake sugar or anything in it. So it is really nice, and it tastes good.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, I need to ask you on the same thought on honey, and I'm very familiar with road rash. Have you ever used a honey poultice, a bandage wrap, put honey on the road rash, put a bandage over it, and worked it that way?
I've never done that. How is that something that's typically worked? Is that something that you guys do?
Yeah. Actually,
really?
honey is used widely in treating diabetic ulcer wounds and burns, and there's even some commercial products where honey is the primary application or primary product of the wrap. Yeah.
Very cool. I had no idea, but I do get a lot of road rashes. So that would be, I'll absolutely try it. That's really interesting.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of research. It's not fake science. There's a lot of positive research about the osmotic effects of honey and treatment of wounds.
Huh. Very cool.
And the antibiotic effects of the pH and all of those things.
Yeah.
So, yes, it can be very beneficial for those kinds of wounds. And I can honestly say I've never had road rash, so I am going on.
Good for you.
Yeah. I would suggest avoiding it too, Kim.
Yes.
So, do you eat all of the honey that you produce, Maghalie?
We eat quite a bit, but we give it away to friends. Really,
yeah.
I just think it's fun to share it with people around us, and yeah. So we don't eat it all, but yeah, we give away quite a lot, and we even bring it on to races sometimes to give it to people outside of our region. It's a fun thing, or to exchange it with people that have hives somewhere else in the country or in other country, and then you can taste the difference. I think that's really fascinating, always.
Yeah.
You know, something I just listening to you thinking about this. Could you, as you're in your race, have a 12-ounce bear with a spout and take a sip of honey during your race? Is that allowed?
It is allowed, yeah. So you're allowed to carry some. Usually, like what's popular is they have gels. So they're packet gels, and basically it could be honey. You know, it's just like a syrupy sugar, basically, that you can eat. The advantage of taking those is the package that is very convenient. But yes, I could decide to make my own and use honey. It would work.
Well, I have to say this, Jeff, there's food for thought.
Oh. We'll allow you that one, Kim. That's good. So I was thinking about your bees. When your winter losses, when you got into them this spring, did you take a look at the layout of your bees and did they have a lot of honey? Were they left in the hive, or was it completely bare? Were there any dead bees inside? What did you find?
Yeah, so the first time that we lost the hive, like a few years ago, that was our mistake. So, you know, we've started having bees with absolutely no knowledge at all. So we just read books and all. And the first time we lost a hive, we had 3 hives, and one of them was bigger, just a bigger colony than the others. And we were so amateur, we didn't think about it, and we fed them the same thing. You know, we left the same amount of honey for all the hives. And this one, unfortunately, since the colony was bigger, didn't have enough to survive the winter. Like the 2 others did, and this one didn't. We felt really bad, but we noticed right away when we opened the hive in the spring, because you could see, it was so sad to see, but you could see that the bees had died. Like there was nothing left, and they were trying to find food in the honeycombs. This was not the case this time. There was still bees. It seems like there were less than before, than like a normal colony. It's really difficult, you know, just because I don't have much knowledge, so it's hard to compare. I just know that it did not look at all the same way. That it seemed that there was still some sugar left inside, but yeah, I wish I could tell you, but I really, it's hard for me to say. I still look at there's like a forum from the people from the region, like sharing what they've seen and what their opinion is. So I'm still following that closely because here, some people are still opening the hives like now. There was still snow like 2 weeks ago, so it's just they're still at that stage. But hopefully we'll learn more by comparing what I see from others online in the next couple days, weeks.
Yeah.
But yeah, what do you guys think it could be? Just the mites, really?
Well, I'll make this offer. When you open it, if you want to take a couple of pictures and send them to me, I'll be happy to look. How's that?
Yeah, no, that's good because we actually they've been open, but we didn't do anything with them. Like they're still in the backyard. I think from what I've heard, we might need to burn some of the frames just because of because it rot a little bit, but it's still there. So I will take photos and share it for you. That would be great.
Before you start burning, I suspect you didn't have American foul brood, but that's only a suspicion.
Okay.
And if I was going to guess what was going on, your mite treatment program last fall, what did you do last summer and fall?
We did, so we did it. I mean, we did the same that we had done the years before, but we did the varroa mite treatment. So with the, what is it called? The acid, folic
oxalic acid.
Oxalic.
Exactly.
Oxalic.
So we did that. I think we did some treatments after the first harvest. So we did the treatments in the summer, and then we did the treatments again in the fall. And then we fed them with some sugar mixed with apple cider vinegar, like that little mixture, we fed them. And then we had to leave for some races at the end of October. So we fed them before that. And then we wrapped them up at the end of October and left. So we had done that the year before, and they all survived, but maybe our protocol wasn't good. Like, what do you think?
I'm guessing. Without a little more information and being able to look, I would suggest. Well, the other thing, Maghalie, is do you do mite tests? Do you sample your bees for mites using the wash?
The wash or sugar shake.
I've heard of that. I've never done it. What we've done is like counting on the drawer, like cleaning the drawer and then leaving it for a few days and then counting the mites per square, like I've done that, but I don't know how precise it is. But I've heard about that where you put like about 100 bees and then you wash them and you count how many mites there are left. Is that more precise?
That's going to be more precise, and it's going to be something you're going to want to think a lot about this year.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I think the treatments are based on the number of mites, right? That's what I had read. So I based the number of treatments that I had to do based on the count I did, but maybe my count was off.
And the mite drop, the natural mite drop on an inspection board is typically much lower than the actual infestation.
Okay, so maybe I didn't treat enough.
Yeah, well, I'm with Kim. My first suspect, if I can speak for what I suspect Kim's thought is, but it's probably due to varroa and varroa-related disease more than any one other specific thing. Okay. And that seems to be the case throughout the country, but United States and Canada in many cases. Just the varroa we're really, really hard on the bees this last winter.
And why do you think, like in a particular winter, they could be harder this year than they were in the previous year?
I think it's just happenstance. I mean, I think it just depends on the particular colony's ability to recover from the varroa and their resistance and climate, how often they can get out, and the bees can get out, and also the treatment protocols prior to going into the fall. So I think the three things kind of can add up against the beekeeper and the colony. Queen strength is another thing. If you had older queen going into the winter, whereas the prior years you had younger queens, and they're just able to produce healthier offspring in the fall going into it. So it just all kind of adds into
Take your pick.
Yeah. Yeah. It's never just one, but it's always just like, the straw that broke the camel back.
Yeah. I mean, it's so hard, but isn't that what keeps it interesting for someone like you, Kim? Just the fact that you can never really know what nature is going to do. So you always it keeps you on your toes. Is that something that keeps you going, trying to learn more and more every year?
Well, after this many years, sometimes nature yelling surprise gets old, but yes, they're trying to figure out what they're doing and what they're going to do next is a great part of the attraction for me.
Yeah. I'm tired. Well, I'm tired of Varroa. Like Kim, not as long ago, but I started beekeeping before Varroa, so I still have memories of those days when you didn't have to worry about treating for Varroa, and the bees were just healthy through the winter, and all you had to do is provide, a wrap and get them through and enough food, and they'd be healthy and strong in the next spring. And the queens were strong, and they lived for years, and the grass was green and the sky blue.
Yeah, that is fun.
In the good old days. But no, that would be my guess, Maghalie, is it's the Varroa just were overwhelmed the bees this last year.
And can I ask, maybe that's a amateur question, but does every country have to deal with Varroa, or is that something that, where, I don't know, is it everywhere?
Everywhere but Australia.
Well, okay. Australia and New Brunswick.
Really?
Newfoundland.
Okay.
Which one's the island? Newfoundland.
Newfoundland, yeah.
Yeah, they don't have Varroa. We talked to... I don't know right off the top of my head, but we talked to, we had a guest on a year and a half ago or so, and he was from Newfoundland, and he was in charge of keeping Newfoundland Varroa free. And in Australia, Varroa free, Kim, and New Zealand, I think, is New Zealand.
I should know this, and I don't. I don't think they're Varroa free, but don't hold me to that.
Yeah,
I don't want to offend anybody in New Zealand.
Yeah.
Okay. And it came from climate change. Sorry, I mean those are such basic questions for you guys, so you probably have covered in all episodes. But how did they come? Like Varroa, is it like a climate change situation or something else?
They were generously imported by somebody from their original places over in Indonesia, that part of the world. And queens and bees have been spread all over.
Okay.
People think that they found the perfect queen, bring it to the United States along with 3 or 4 Varroa, and suddenly you've got it. It was discovered, and I want to say, what, Jeff, 84?
Yeah,
85?
Yeah, it was mid-'80s in Florida, wasn't it? And
well, they found it in Wisconsin, but Wisconsin brought it up from Florida.
Bees from Florida,
so,
yeah. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Yeah, unfortunately.
There's a breed of bee in Central Asia, the Apis cerana, that the Varroa is a natural host, or the bee is a natural host for the Varroa, and they've learned to coexist. Okay. But for the Western honeybee, the Varroa is an unnatural mite. And they haven't learned to live with each other, so the Varroa ends up being a true parasite and killing the host. So, it's not a good situation.
No.
Maghalie, I'm going to switch gears here completely again, because I just have no idea about professional bike racing. How long have you been doing this? And on average, how long will you be able to do this? I mean, professional football players and baseball players run out of steam at some point in their life.
Yeah.
How is it for bikers?
Yeah. So, I mean, I started riding when I was probably 7 or 8 years old. But professionally, I've been doing it since I was 19 years old. That was when I signed my first contract. I'm now 29, and there are some people in the peloton that go all the way until 40-ish. So maybe I can go for another 10 years, but I would say on average, maybe at between 35 and 40 is when people start to retire normally. So I still have a few years if I want to.
Yeah.
But
that's good.
Yeah. But nothing gets. I mean, yeah. Some girls, some women are actually really strong in there as they get older. But yeah, there's just your body has more injuries and stuff that are harder to keep up with. So yeah, it doesn't get easier with age, but some people do get stronger. And the other thing is that you gain experience, and so you're much smarter in the decision you make. And racing has a lot of tactics going on. So if you're an experienced rider, usually you can do better with less energy sometimes, just because you use your energy and your effort in a smarter way. So that's the positive about getting older.
That's the only one I've ever heard, I think.
Maghalie, you, besides the professional racing that you're doing, the cyclocross racing, you also have a podcast. You want to talk a little bit about your podcast that you host as well?
Yeah, sure. So the podcast, it's called Fever Talk, and fever for me, it's like my way of describing my passion for things. So I have fever when we open the hive, actually, and I get to see what's happening. I get fever when I'm riding a really fun cyclocross course, so that's how I describe it. And I just basically like to talk with people that are passionate and yeah, some people in cycling, but some people that are passionate about other things that they do. And I just love to learn about these people. So it's very simple, but it's just fun conversation with passionate people trying to learn, sometimes see similarities with cycling, sometimes just completely dive in their own world so I can learn. Just I'm a curious person in general, so I love to learn about people. And yeah, I think passionate people, they know a lot about their craft, so it's fun to dig in and get to know more.
Very good. And where can people listen to your podcast?
It's called Fever Talk. So wherever you find podcasts, it's on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and all of those other platforms.
Really good. And we'll have a link to your show and to your website in our show notes. So
cool.
Folks can check out your podcast and your cycling history. Is there anything that we haven't asked you that you would like to talk about?
Not really. I guess like maybe one thing, since we talked about the fact that, anybody can be a beekeeper.
Yeah.
I mean, now it sounds bad because my 3 hives died, but we still had them for 4 years. I guess all I want to say is that I knew nothing when I started, and my husband either. But we still decided to go for it, and we learned as we go. And it's been really not only, mostly successful, but I think it's been fascinating. Like every year we've learned more, and every time we opened the hive, we were understanding a little bit more what we were seeing. And that for me was a fascinating and addictive feeling. I would see something and understand, and then I'd go read and I understand more. And then the next time I opened, I could see the evolution and then try to see, as much as the first few times we opened it and we had absolutely no clue what we were looking at, as time went on, we were able to see a little bit more, okay, what can we do to help them by understanding what we're seeing, what can we do to help them? And then having conversation with people to understand more. It's just been absolutely enriching and stimulating to do. And I think even though you don't know anything, if you have an interest and some time to invest, I think it's worth it. And you end up knowing a little bit more. And even like on top of that, I think the impact it had on the property where we live, when we moved there was nothing. Like everything was mostly dead. And it was, the old house that we bought again. And when we had bees, suddenly we started having flowers, butterflies, birds that came, like the whole ecosystem around the house. It's like a tiny ecosystem, but everything changed completely. And that was just so cool, Yeah. So I think all of that, it just made us live so many cool things that, if I had just been scared of trying because I didn't know about it, I would have missed out, I think. And so I think if you're hesitating because you don't know about it, just go for it and you'll learn as you go. I think that's just the one thing that for me has been a good lesson that I can apply in other things in life, I felt.
Oh, very good. I think that's a great summary of beekeeping.
That's a nice summary.
Yeah,
yes.
Very much so.
Well done.
Well, thanks. And it's fun. It's also humbling, to start something that you don't know anything about, but it's quite fun. And it's fun to learn about people like the both of you who just know so much about it. And yeah, it's very, very cool.
Well, thank you. It's been a great pleasure having you on the show, and look forward to hearing more about your successes in beekeeping and your successes on the race course.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having us. And we do have some races in Ohio sometimes, or in Wisconsin, that which is not too far. So maybe one day I could go see your apiary, Kim, if it's not too far.
The door's always open.
Oh, well, thank you. That'd be fun.
One quick question before we go. When and where is your next race?
Oh, the next one is in Quebec, actually, not too far from here, next week. So it's called Baie-Saint-Paul in the Charlevoix region, so not too far from here. But the ones that are in the Midwest, those are coming in October. So I'll be in the Midwest in October. Yeah.
All right. Well, good luck on your next and all the rest of your races.
Thank you so much.
And Maghalie, next time you talk to the folks at Rafa, just kind of drop the idea about the Rafa branded beekeeping suit. It'd go over well, I'm sure.
Amazing. Let's ask let's ask your guests who would be in, and then if we have enough interest, maybe they go for it. But they are very open. They love ideas, so maybe.
Yeah. All right. Well.
All right.
Thanks a lot, Maghalie. Take care.
You as well.
So you ready to go out and buy a bike, Kim?
Not in your life, Jeff, or mine.
Come on. I've biked in Medina County. It's a good place to bike.
Yeah, I'll watch. How's that? Well, one of the things that Maghalie was talking about was getting older and how things get harder. And I appreciate that more than you will ever know. So I'll watch and I'll let you do the biking. But she was a joy. That was really fun. And it's something I have no idea of how it worked. And she kind of opened my eyes a little bit to professional bike racing and beekeeping. So thanks for inviting her.
Yeah, I think it's, to our listeners, this is something that Kim and I are looking to do, is to find people that you wouldn't think as being beekeepers who are beekeepers. So we have Maghalie today. We've recently had Darren Mays on, who's a New York City Police Department officer who liked beekeeping, got into beekeeping, was a police officer. They found out that he liked bees, and he became the official New York City Department official beekeeper. And if you haven't heard that episode, look it up. It just came out recently. If you know of anybody who's a fascinating person who keeps bees, let us know. We're going to try to do this about once every once in a while when we can find guests who are willing to talk to us about it and share their story with you, our listeners. So thanks. Yeah, it's fun. Thanks, Maghalie.
That was good.
Well, that about wraps it up for this episode. Before we go, I want to encourage our listeners to rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or wherever you download and stream the show. Your vote helps other beekeepers find us quicker. Even better, write a review and let other beekeepers looking for a new podcast know what you like. You can get there directly from our website by clicking on reviews along the top of any web page. As always, we thank Bee Culture, the magazine for American beekeeping, for their continued support of Beekeeping Today podcast. We want to thank our regular episode sponsor, Global Patties. Check them out at globalpatties.com. Thanks to Strong Microbials for their support of this podcast. Check out their probiotic line at strongmicrobials.com. We want to thank Better Bee for their longtime support. Check out all their great beekeeping supplies at betterbee.com. Thanks to Northern Bee Books for their support of Bee Books Old New with Kim Flodham. Check out all of their books at northernbeebooks.co.uk. And finally, and most importantly, we want to thank you, the Beekeeping Today podcast listener, for joining us on the show. Feel free to leave us comments and questions at Leave a Comment section under each episode on the website. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks a lot, everybody.